what horrified me the most is the idea of being useless, well educated, brilliantly promising, and fading into an indifferent middle age. I read that sentence by Sylvia Plath last year, and it stayed with me more than I expected. Not as inspiration, not as something aesthetic, but as quiet pressure in the background of everything I do. Especially after moving to another country where I didn't have any academic structure to rely on, only my own knowledge, and whatever I could build from it. That's when I started thinking seriously about systems. Not productivity systems in a motivational sense, but ways of working that could hold me through different seasons of life, even the ones where nothing felt clear. I heard the idea by my teacher in high school: you just need to push to start moving, like inertia. The idea that something keeps doing what it's already doing unless a force changes it. But what people don't talk about is how hard it is to start moving when nothing inside you feel stable. And I know it's a cliche, but it's what I'm doing by starting. When I feel lost, I always come back to the basic, not only in 3D, but in everything. I go back to my childhood, old diaries, old photos, things that don't really explain anything, but somehow still feel like me. I don't do it as strategy. It's more like something I fall into without thinking. Because in those places where something doesn't depend on motivation or clarity or even direction, just a kind of simplicity I can hold on to when everything else feels like it's moving too fast or too far away from me. I've been studying 3D for almost 5 years. I didn't come from an art background, so everything was new. Software, terminology, the way people think about structure, workflow, it felt like learning how to walk. I still remember the first time I opened ZBrush. My grandmother was in the background laughing, and I was crying and screaming. Nothing made sense. I didn't even understand what I was supposed to do. And in the back of my mind, there was this thought I couldn't ignore. Maybe I'm not going to learn this. Because around me, there was already people I admired who felt so far ahead. Everyone said the same thing. There are tutorials everywhere on YouTube. You can learn anything by yourself. And that's true. But what they don't talk about is how overwhelming it feels when you don't even know where to start. When everything looks important, but nothing feels clear. I didn't know what to focus on. I didn't know how to structure my learning. I just feel like I was moving without direction. At some point, I had to ask myself why I was even doing this. I was in Panama at the time, a beautiful place, but with no real 3D industry around me. So I knew this path wasn't practical in a traditional sense. But I was a dreamer, and everyone who knew me could probably say that. So I kept going, slowly, even when I felt like I wasn't progressing in any clear way. Eventually, I enrolled in an online school, and I remember thinking, now I'm going to be ready. Now I'm going to get a real job, something that challenges me, something makes me better. But the reality hit me different than I expected. I had all this expectation tied to it: portfolio, CV, recognition, validation, everything mixed together. And it came one of the most difficult periods of my life. Not because of sculpting, modeling, topology, or UVs. The real difficulty wasn't technical, it was pressure. The constant feeling that I should be doing more. The constant comparison. Seeing another's people work and immediately measure myself against it. Slowly, without noticing, I started stepping away from my own process. At one point, I had to stop looking at other people's work so much because I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't learning anymore. I was comparing. And comparison doesn't really push you forward. It just makes you question where you stand all the time. That's where I started losing the reason I was doing this in the first place. Art stopped being something I was exploring and became a list of tasks, a set of goals, a checklist. And I forgot something very simple. I didn't start this to match anyone. I started this because I want to create something that make people feel something and to feel something by myself while doing it. That's when the idea of assistant started forming, not as something rigid, not as a perfect method, but as something I could return to when everything started breaking internally. And I started noticing a pattern. Every time I felt stuck, it's usually because of the same things. I'm overwhelmed, I'm comparing myself, or I have lost clarity about why I am doing it. So my response became simpler over time. When I feel overwhelmed, I come back to the basic. I reduce complexity instead of increasing effort. I simplify what I am working on until I can actually think again. When I start comparing myself, I step away from it. Not because other people don't matter, but because interrupts the process. And I lose consistency the moment I start judging instead of building. And when I lost direction completely, I come back to one question. Why am I doing this? Not am I good enough? Not am I progressing fast enough? Just that. Because if I lose that answer, everything else became noise again. I can't lie. Sometimes I still fall into comparison. Sometimes I still get stuck in paralysis. It doesn't disappear completely, but I try to return to that structure when it happens. Not perfectly, just consistently enough to keep going. And maybe that's what consistency actually is, not pushing harder, not being perfect, but knowing how to come back when you lose your way. Thank you.